Good day, everyone. We're right at the top of the hour, and it's time to begin our webinar for today. I'm your host, Mike Lasecki, and this webinar is brought to you by the Center's Collaborative for Technical Assistance. I have a few announcements to make and a brief information about the system that we're using today. Let's take a look at this webinar details. You'll be in listen-only mode. I think most of you know this. But there will be an opportunity to ask questions via the Q&A window. Make sure when you type in your question that you hit send. And we'll be asking you questions via the polling function. This webinar will be recorded, and I'd like to ask Christina to make sure that the recording is switched on. Thank you, Christina. The Center's Collaborative for Technical Assistance is led by 5 different centers that you see here. These centers are all funded by the Advanced Technological Education Program at the National Science Foundation, and they include CTC in Texas, the South Carolina Skate Center, the Florida Flate Center, the BioLink Center out in San Francisco, and Networks Resource Center at the Maricopa Community Colleges in Phoenix, Arizona. We acknowledge our grateful support to the National Science Foundation as well. The CCTA purpose is to respond to requests from the Department of Labor to share our resources and activities that are relevant to not only DOL, but NSF grants as well. What do? Well, we deliver webinars like this one, we document best practices, and we host convenings. We'll tell you more about that as we proceed today. But let's begin. Christina, will you please open the poll? Folks, turn your eyes, not tune your eyes, turn your eyes to the right, and it says, what is your affiliation? Are you involved with an NSF grant, a TAC grant, both, or neither? And please hit submit on that. Now, most of you know the answer to this question. I'll just give you 5 more seconds and then ask Christina to close the poll and show us the results. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Make sure you hit submit. Christina, let's see who's here today. It does take a moment for the polling to go up into the cloud, for the answers to come back down, and for them to be displayed. So we'll hold on just a moment. I don't know about you folks, but I've had the fortune to be involved with both. Oh, look at those results. Some of us involved with the NSF, the TAC, both, but the majority of us have not been involved with these grants. Well, that's good, because there are opportunities in the future that we might explore together. Let's take a look at the next slide, which is the next poll. Go ahead and close that one, Christina. Now, for our purposes of the National Science Foundation reporting our information to the NSF, we often ask if there are more than one person listening with you. For example, you could click on the radio button and say, nope, there's nobody else, just me, or one other person, or 2 or 3. So please check those radio buttons and then hit submit. It'll just take a moment. Christina, I'm going to count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's close that poll and take a look at the results and see how many multiples of us are listening today. Information is being sent up to the cloud, being sent back down to us so that we can see it on your screen. I remember in our work group one time we all had lunch and there were 6 of us in the room watching the webinar. But most of us, as you see by the results, are just there by ourselves, and a few of us have colleagues with us. Well, thanks. That helps us understand. Go ahead and close that, Christina. That helps us understand the impact of the event that we're doing today. Now on the next slide, it's my opportunity to introduce today's key people. There's me on the right, Mike Lasecki. But also joining us is Sandra Porter. Dr. Porter is the president of Digital World Biotechnology, LLC, and she's the co-PI with BioLink. Sandy, I see you that you've unmuted your speaker. Could you please say hello to everyone? We'll do a final audio check.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Mike.
Good. That sounds good, Sandy. Thank you for joining us. And also today, joining us is Elaine Johnson. Dr. Johnson is Executive Director and Principal Investigator of the BioLink National Center. Welcome, Elaine. Thank you very much for joining today. I'd like you now to come on and tell us what you describe as making a conscious effort to include career exploration. Go ahead, Elaine.
Thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's really fun to have so many participants, and I hope that you'll all be thinking of questions and interacting with us as we go through this presentation. The conscious effort part is one that we've learned about as we've developed programs across the country in biotechnology and other ATE projects, with the big interest in providing skills, the hands-on skills, the workplace skills that students need in order to get careers in emerging technologies. And we've also worked very closely with industry partners. One of the things, however, that is characteristic across the country is that there are many programs that don't realize the lack of information for the students, counselors, the parents, all people involved in these programs. So we came up with the idea that we need to make that conscious effort to include a career exploration in these areas of emerging technologies that might not be so evident to the students, like nursing or automotive technician, for example. Now, how do we do that? Well, there are a lot of resources available that have been created over the past 22, 23 years as part of the ATE program. And using these resources is a wonderful way to start. The resources can be indexed and found at ATE Central. So there is a common place where resources are linked and made available to everyone. And these, on ATE Central, you can also find links to ONET, the Department of Labor site, and to many of the others, including the different projects, the national centers, the regional centers that have engaged in career exploration and generously shared it so that we can all benefit from that. In addition to knowing what careers are out there, there's also this part of discovering oneself and what one likes and what the strengths of an individual might be. And that's an important piece that we will also touch on in the next webinar when we're talking about career coaching. Other ways that students and faculty and people in general find out about these careers is having guest speakers from industry. And we now have the luxury of having many of our students now working in companies, and they are absolutely outstanding speakers when they come back and share their own stories about how they have come through a ATE program and got a trajectory for their own career path. Industry tours is also a very important piece. Internships, where our students get out and actually work. And there are others. And as you think of those, you might, in addition to just putting in a Q&A, you might put in something that you can identify with as something in your own program that helps with this whole understanding of these emerging technology careers. With that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Porter, who has a vast amount of experience working in the workforce development and career exploration area, and she will take over now.
Sandy, it's Mike. Make sure you come off of mute, okay? There you go. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. There are a couple more things that we'd like to know about you, and you should be able to, yeah, exactly. So the poll should be showing up on the right-hand side, we'd like to know a little bit about your background. So if you could pick the option that fits the best and be sure to hit submit, that'd be great. Thanks. Oops, I suppose I should do this too, huh? How are we doing with information coming from the cloud, Mike?
It looks good. Let's give them a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now the poll's closed. It'll take just a moment, Sandy, for those information to appear. You'll see them in just a second. So right, going up to the cloud, back down from the cloud.
Wonderful, thanks.
We blame the cloud for any small delays.
Always a good practice.
Yes, okay. So let's hold on just 1 second. There's the results. Sandy, take a look at that. The biggest one is administrators.
Wow. I'm not sure I would have expected that, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's different from any of our other previous webinars, and this is really exciting because we need administrators to support some of the career exploration activities.
All right. We have another poll coming up on the next slide here. And here we're wondering about, for those of you who are coaching students in careers or teaching, we're wondering what you do, if you teach classes, what you do. Do any of you incorporate career exploration in your courses, or have your instructors do that? So again, if you could click the answer that fits best in the poll that's showing up on the right, and be sure to press submit.
So we see the information coming in, Sandy. Their responses are, yes, they do, sometimes. That's me, I hate to say. Not yet, but maybe in the future, or never. So let's give another countdown, not too hard a question. Christina, let's go ahead and close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, good, folks. Thanks for your responses. It takes just a minute to process that information, and then we'll see the results in just a second, Sandy. So let's hold on here. I should do it more often than sometimes, you know. I'm just thinking of myself here. There's the results. Oh, that's good. A very strong yes for those who incorporate career exploration right in their classes. That's excellent.
Oh yeah, that really is great. Let's continue on to our next slide. And we're really glad that you're here and a lot of you are doing this because we have a favor to ask of you before we go any farther. You've seen where you can enter information in that Q&A box. We'd like you to consider sharing some of your favorite approaches for career research during the webinar by typing them there. And then also, if there are any questions that you come up with during the talk, put those in the Q&A area so we can get to those during the question times. And then we'll share your strategies towards the end of the webinar. There are 4 kind of main areas or sites that I'd like to highlight today, though we'll be talking about a few more as well. These are the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics job site, or statistics site that is, a related site also developed by the Department of Labor called ONET, a site that we built called Biotech Careers, and a site called ATE-TV, which was developed by the Advanced Technology Education Community and funded by the National Science Foundation. And we're going to talk about 3 different job examples today, one from computer-related careers, one from manufacturing, and one from biotechnology. So we'll show you how we might research those careers at the different sites. At the end of the talk, since we are going to have a few different websites that we're covering, we do have a resource slide with URLs, and that'll have all the resources that we talk about so you can visit them later on your own. On the next slide, I want to just highlight some of the guiding questions that you probably use or we also use when we're advising students on research and careers. And I have the ones in bold are the ones I'm going to kind of hit on it first, which is, what do you like to do? What do you find interesting? What do you value? Your time off, your time away, where do you want to live? And along those lines, where are the jobs? Because your choice about where you live is really going to limit the kinds of jobs that you might be able to look for. And then along the lines about where the jobs are, it's important to know what they pay. Let's continue to our next slide. So we're starting off here at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which can be pretty overwhelming, but the most useful part I find for occupational research is the Occupational Outlook Handbook at the Bureau, which is a great comprehensive source of data. So I think the best part of this site, actually, let me back up for a minute. So careers in this handbook are organized into 25 occupational groups, and they cover over 800 occupations. So we're going to drill down through one of these groups to see what we can find. Mike, can you highlight where the arrow is pointing to the group for computer and information technology? Okay, let's click that arrow and drill down to see what that occupation looks like. Okay, so we can see on this page we've got descriptions of a few of the careers in computer and information technology, and I'm only showing you a small part of the top of this page. There's really quite a few here. Interestingly, up at the top, that we can see that this area is really projected to grow, and we see the median salary in this area is $82,000 per year, which is twice as high as the median salary for all other occupations. Now, salary shouldn't be your only factor in considering a career, but it's good not to ignore it. You don't want to miss out on opportunities just because you didn't know what the difference is. Mike, can you click the arrow at the bottom, and let's take a look at the computer systems analyst position. Okay, so this is an example of some of the information that we can see for one of these occupations. We can see kind of a breakdown of the median pay. We can see the outlook. Are the number of jobs in this area projected to increase or decrease, which is really good to know. And we're only looking again at a really small fraction of information on this page. Every single tab at the top takes us to a heading down farther in the page that has more information is linked to other things. And if I were to scroll down or click the tab for the state and area data part, let's do that, Mike. You can just click the next slide. It would take me to a part where I have information about states and areas. In that section, there are links to all kinds of maps. And the maps are really nice because maps show us where jobs are expected to grow. Usually a darker color shows you the amount of employment for somebody in a particular state. And we can also see the mean wage for that job by state. So it's interesting, I think, to see that some occupations grow in some states, and it's interesting to see how the pay varies from state to state. And I think that's important. Let's continue on to the next slide. Okay, now let's look at another occupation here in the Occupational Handbook. And this, right now, we're looking at production occupations. Okay, and this is why I think it's really important to look at salary and job outlook, because production occupations are those occupations that fall into manufacturing. And you can see here that the number of jobs that are projected between 2014 and 2024, they're going to decline by about 3%. You can also see that unlike our computer analyst positions, where the median wage was $82,000 a year, the median wage for jobs in production occupations is $33,000 a year. Good to know. So Mike, can you click the arrow next to assemblers and fabricators? So assemblers and fabricators are people working in manufacturing plants that build engines and computers and aircraft and ships and boats and toys and electronic devices, control panels, a lot of stuff. Now, this job doesn't require a lot of education, but you can also see it doesn't pay very well because the median salary is about $31,000 a year. So this is the kind of thing I think students should know before they pick a job. Okay, before we continue, I'd like to see, are there any questions thus far about the Occupational Outlook Handbook?
Sandy, I do have not so much questions, but remember we ask people to put in their own ideas of resources that we use. And let me talk a little bit about some of the things that have come in. From one of our participants, he encourages his students to connect with graduates of the programs who are employed in the workforce. He feels that's a good source of how it really is. Do you do that for your students in your biotech as well? Do you have an active alumni connection?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, at Shoreline Community College in the fall, they have a Welcome New Students Day, and they bring back alumni to talk about their jobs and what they're doing. So it's really helpful.
Oh, good. That's a good
Elaine.
point.
In San Francisco, we also have numbers of speakers, and including a course that is offered for dual enrollment by high school students, and industry speakers and particularly former graduates come back and talk about what they're doing. And we also have a networking event and invite our former graduates to come and talk to the current students and to review the poster sessions. And there's a common and very interesting and dynamic interchange. We did have a club, and now we don't have that club, and that might be something to reconsider to reinstate. So I'm glad that question came up, or that comment came up.
Thank you, Elaine. You know, Sandy, others have commented in the Q&A window ideas of their own. You mentioned some of the sites that you use. Some of their favorites, of course, are the Bureau of Labor Statistics that you mentioned, as well as ONET, and something called MERIC, which I didn't know of. It's apparently specific to the, state of Missouri labor, though I think there are some state-specific resources as well. Workforce Investment Boards, EMSI, Burning Glass. Many of us are familiar with those job forecasting things. I don't think our students can have direct access to Burning Glass or EMSI. Do you use either of those tools, Burning Glass, Sandy, in your work?
I do look at Burning Glass from time to time. Not so much for forecasts, but every now and then.
Good.
EMSI, this is the first I've heard of that one.
Go ahead, Elaine.
I'd like to add that the state of California put together an entire statewide report on both demand and production of workers through the community colleges for the biotech industry. And the individual who worked on that used Burning Glass and went into the job announcements. And this was particularly interesting because the job announcements, what they were asking for, did not necessarily match with the academic career requirements. Namely, they would put in bachelor's degrees, but the job itself wouldn't really require a bachelor's degree. And so to use Burning Glass to dive deeper into what the jobs were actually asking for was a very important piece.
Cool. One last comment before we go on from this question thing, Sandy, is one of our colleagues said they have an interesting approach. During Student Orientation Day, they encourage former graduates to Skype in to orientation sessions where students can ask questions of the former graduates who's currently in the workforce. That sounds pretty cool, so I thought that was a good idea. Sandy, it's working. People are using that Q&A window to tell us their ideas and to tell us things that have made sense for them. Let's take ourselves forward and talk about now biotechcareers.org.
Thanks, Mike. Biotechcareers.org is a site that we built as part of BioLink. And we did this because while sites like the Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and ONET are great, they do require, I think, kind of a high reading level. And sometimes high tolerance for clicking links and getting lost and figuring out where to go. So what we did was to try to make something where the navigation was a little bit more intuitive. Now, this site also focuses on biotechnology, but I want to stress that it really includes multiple areas of the entire bioeconomy, such as biomanufacturing, consumer goods, fermented and engineered food, biosafety, fashion, material science, bioagriculture, and a lot more. I recently attended a conference, actually, where the keynote speaker claimed that everything we make with oil products is going to be made in the future through biotechnology. I thought that was kind of a bold statement, but you know, who knows? There are also groups talking about how we're going to be using DNA to replace our hard drives in our computers, because where we might change the technology that we use to read stored information, we are always going to have technology to read DNA sequences. I thought that was really interesting. And I think back about all the floppy disks I had sitting around my desk, and I'm never going to get the information out of them. So I know what they mean. Okay, so anyway, biotechcareers.org has a lot of resources for students. Let's continue on to the next slide. I mentioned before briefly our sponsors, but I want to come back to that. So this was funded by the National Advanced Technology Center of Excellence in Biotechnology from the National Science Foundation ATE program. And most of this came from BioLink, but we also received funding from the AC2 BioLink Regional Center based at Austin Community College and NBC2, the Northeast Biomanufacturing Consortium, which is based in Pennsylvania. We'll continue on to the next slide. Okay, so we mentioned those questions, right? The guiding questions: what do you like to do? What do you find interesting? What do you value? We talked a little bit about some of the information about where jobs are and what they pay, but let's continue on to helping students figure out what they like. Let's look at the next slide. Okay, as many people have noted, the people that know the most and the best experts you can get to talk to students are our alumni and people that have graduated from the BioLink or whatever community college or whatever programs. So here at Biotech Careers, we actively seek out our alumni and we ask them to share photos of themselves on the job and answer interview questions so that we can learn a little bit more about the day. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, we think it really helps them to see other people like them working as professionals in positions of responsibility, because we think, oh yeah, they look at them and go, well, they're not so much older than me, and they can do that. Maybe I can do that too. Let's continue on to the next slide. So here is an example of one of the interviews with one of our alumni, and she talks about where she went to school, the degree that she got, what she does during the day, kind of what advice she would give, and we ask them too is there anything they would like to add? And then we also list, are there other kinds of degrees or certificates that might be helpful? Let's continue on to the next slide. One other thing that we've done at Biotech Careers is to compile a lot of video interviews with our students as well. And some of the video interviews that we got, we were able to get from ATE TV. ATE TV has, as at the top, 228 videos, and they're wonderful because a lot of them have students. They show students on the job. They show people in school, and it's a really, really great resource. Elaine, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think that the thing that I would like to add is the fact that there are numbers of teachers, high school teachers, community college faculty that use some of this material in different ways. And One of them in particular, George Katsianis at Lincoln High School in San Francisco, has used the videos, but they pass out cards in the classroom, or actually larger sheets of paper with different colors, and the students are either assigned or they can choose a career that they want to research, and then they write a little bit about it and post it with clothespins around the room, and pretty soon you've got a room surrounded by colorful descriptions of different entry-level technician positions. And some, you know, the green ones can be environmental, the blue ones can be laboratory, the red ones can be manufacturing. And so there's a visual surrounding of the whole entire room, and the students can describe what they researched, and they can also go up and look at these different careers and get an experience that is partially their own, because they put together some effort into going in and looking at the videos. And this could be also the ATE TV videos as well.
Okay, let's go on to the next slide. A couple of things we did for organizing information at Biotech Careers is to group the types of jobs by job area. So we know there are some students that might want to work, for example, in biofuels, or they might want to work in aquaculture, they might want to work in defense. So jobs are organized that way. We also organized jobs by the job title so that students can take some mysterious job title like pilot, plant operator, and see how that fits in and what that person might actually be doing on the job. Let's continue to the next slide. When students come to the site, they can explore by education level, they can explore by job area, and then they can also search for jobs by starting salary, so they can get an idea of what jobs are going to pay more and where they're at. So all these things are kind of linked to each other so that they can drill down and go farther. I want to point out, too, that in biotechnology, at least, many times a student might start out at a job that a lower-paying job with fewer responsibilities, like glass washing or a greenhouse technician. And there are many biotech companies that actually pay for additional training. So a student might start out at a lower position, but then there might be opportunities to advance. Let's go to the next slide.
This is one where I wanted to make a comment about our whole topic for the day. We called it career exploration. The last slide that Sandy showed was about exploring careers. But if you go to some of the other national centers, regional centers, you'll get similar information, but if you notice the National Convergence Technology Center for Information Technology, if you look at this list of how they have organized their information, you don't see the word career exploration. Instead, it's under a category called job forecast, and then you see career outlooks, salary outlooks, job titles, salary range, internships, find jobs, and future trends. And much of the same information that Sandy has described for the Biotech Careers site is similar to this, but organized in a different way. So that's an important piece to remember in case you Google career exploration and don't find anything, that maybe a different language, different words will bring up some of the same information. Let's go on.
That's a really good, yeah, that's a really good observation, Elaine. And actually, can we go back just one quick? Okay, great. And I think that really is a nice lead-in to our next resource, which is ONET. ONET, where I think Biotech Careers is designed for students of multiple ages, from high school, starting at high school, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics is almost designed for people with PhDs. ONET, I think, really kind of focuses on returning people who are returning to work. Although there's resources for a lot of people at a lot of different levels, and I really like the hot technologies. You can go see what computer languages you should learn. Let's go on to the next slide. So if I take those menus at ONET and I open them up, you can see, if I start on the left, that in crosswalks, you can see that they have specialized information from people who are coming from the Department of Transportation or from the military. If we look in the middle, you can see that they have ways that you can browse here by your work values and your work activities and styles and knowledge and abilities. And if we go over to the far left side, this is where we could look for careers that have a bright outlook, or we can look for careers in the green economy, or STEM careers, or by education, or by industry. Mike, can you click that link and let's look deep down at industry. So when I looked at manufacturing before at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it looked a little bit bleak. Here at ONET, let's look at manufacturing here, one of these selections. We can see that, okay, we're only looking at part of the page, and a lot of things do say decline, which is not great, but there is a bright spot, at least. Here in the middle of this section of that page from ONET, we can see that there actually is at least one manufacturing career that's projected to grow much faster than average, with 71,200 jobs expected to be added before 2024. And that's the computer-controlled machine tool operators. Let's click that link and explore a little further. Okay, so if we go here, we can see a list of some of the tasks that these people might do. We can see some of the technologies that they might use when they're on a job. And every single one of those links at the top would take you to somewhere down the page where you would get more information about this type of career and what kind of education you'd need and where this would fit. So this is, I find this pretty encouraging, and I find this is really interesting site to look at. Let's go on to the next slide. So do we have any questions so far? Any more?
We had a comment and several questions, Sandy. One, as you showed that area of the lingo on the website, several of our participants found that to be interesting and engaging. So that's a good feedback for you on that. And then number two, several people have asked this question. I'll paraphrase it. I'll combine their questions. Another way of determining career information is by actually getting on-the-job experience through something like an internship where you get to experience the job. Do you think that's a common thing, or is it limited because the number of internships are not that great? What's your take on that, Sandy? And then we'll ask Elaine the same question.
I think internships are really important. I worked at a number of part-time jobs when I was figuring out what I wanted to do for a career. And I found, I worked for a veterinarian for a while, and because I thought I might want to be a veterinarian. And I realized most of the veterinarians I worked for were really bored and not that happy with what they were doing, because it just wasn't that interesting once they were on the job. And I wouldn't have known that just from having a pet or reading about it, or reading, you know, All Things Wise and Wonderful, or The Whole Creatures Great and Small, right?
Right.
It was working there that made me realize whether I liked it or not. So, but there's other ways you can do internships. You can do job shadows, you can do informational interviews, visiting companies, but I think internships are the best.
Okay, cool. Let me bring this question forward to you.
Can I answer?
Yeah.
Can we respond to that too?
I promised I would let you go ahead.
The internships, I think, are incredibly valuable, and there are a couple of things I'd like to add to what Sandy said, in addition to what Sandy said. One of them is that this is an entry into real jobs for a number of our students, especially companies or research labs that say they require a bachelor's degree. And when our students get into the internship and demonstrate the skills that they have that are superior to many people who already have bachelor's degrees, they're hired. And that is a true incentive for students to go into the internships. Another piece that is problematic, and we have a number of administrators on this call, and I would really like to make sure that we understand that many of our students are required, essentially by their families, to bring in income sometime, especially during summers. And some of the internships are paid and some of them are not. And the students will gravitate toward paid internships. And if we can figure out that piece, it would be of great value to numbers of students who really need to have some kind of income and not only pay their tuition and take care of themselves, but actually contribute to their families. So that's another whole piece to the internship that I think is really critical. So those are a couple of additional comments.
You know, Sandy and Elaine, one of our participants says that initiatives to develop apprenticeships are becoming much more popular, especially for CTE students, including those that are dual enrolled high school students. Do you find any barrier to under the age of 18, Sandy, for this? I'll ask you, Sandy, and then I'll turn to Elaine. Is there an age barrier for these things?
Yeah, it's really hard to find jobs in biotech for students who are under 18. There used to be a point where it wasn't so hard, and then it's like somebody said, all the companies lawyered up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's difficult to do. Universities and colleges, maybe not so much, but companies, yes.
You know, I work in the advanced manufacturing area, and that's another barrier. That 18-year-old is a barrier for many of the manufacturing things. Elaine, any quick comments on that 18-year-old barrier?
I agree. No, I totally agree. We have a lot of trouble getting anyone under the age of 18 into a biotech company. We even have trouble getting them on tours sometimes. I mean, these companies are pretty secure, and so it's a real challenge, and that's why some of the camps, some of the other experiences are, and the opportunity for the industry people to come and explain to the students the videos, those are helpful to get over that particular barrier. And I think that the whole apprenticeship thing is growing, but it depends on the industry. I think manufacturing in particular is going to benefit greatly from the apprenticeship.
Well, thank you both. One last question for this question period. It's going right back to washing dishes, Sandy. In fact, I remember when I was an undergraduate, I had a job in a chemistry analytical lab, and they assigned me to washing dishes. So here's the question. Many of my students have a hesitation about dishwashing or doing simple jobs. Sandy, how do we convince them they need to start out simple? With an AS or BS, they're not going to start out running a lab.
Right. No, I think that's a really good question. I started out as a dishwasher, but the way we sell it to them, I think, is to explain to them that when they get their foot in a door, it gives them an opportunity to talk to other people. And many companies post their jobs internally first. So they might have a job where they're dishwashing, but then they've got somebody who can recommend them. If a job comes along, they have the opportunity to apply for it before others. So they'll learn a lot.
Good point.
Yeah, we don't want to minimize the value of dishwashing. In biotech, for example, many of the pieces of glassware are rinsed with triple distilled water. They have to be very, very clean. You're going to be growing organisms in them. You know, the value of a really good dishwasher is very critical. So it might be a beginning and a starting place, but it's also very important. And the scientists and the people that run the labs rely on that quality of dishwashing.
Fascinating things. Let's leave dishwashing aside for a moment. Let's take us forward. Sandy, you've talked about these guiding questions. Tell us more about them.
Okay, so just a quick return to what do you find interesting and where are the jobs. Let's look at the next slide. I'm going to show you a little bit about some of the navigation tools at biotechcareers.org. At the very bottom of our main page, we have this jobs, salaries, terms, or careers, and it takes you to this giant page with word clouds. Now, the size of the word reflects the amount of resources we have in job areas. In business areas, the size of the word reflects the number of companies that have indicated that they're involved in this kind of activity. We have hundreds of words in here. Let's look at autoimmunity. If we click any one of those words, it takes us to companies all over the world that are engaged in that kind of research or that kind of activity. Let's look at the next slide. So that helps us, you can look at all those words, see what things are interesting, read about what the companies are doing. Let's think now back to where we want to live and where the jobs might be. Let's go to the next slide. We have different kinds of maps so that students can see where jobs might be located. On the right, we have a map that shows the world. We're not going to go to that right now, but we really want students to understand that biotechnology, at least, is a worldwide industry. Many companies have sites all over the world, and if they get into this industry, they can employ talents like languages, like their knowledge of other cultures that might be useful to them and useful to the company. If we look in the middle map, we have biotechnology in the United States. Can you click that, Mike? Take us to the next slide. And, oh, we're getting an update to Flash Player. Wasn't expecting that.
Excuse me, folks. I thought I had disabled that. Just 1 second here. I'm sorry for that interruption, Sandy.
Oh, no, that's okay. What we'll see as we go on, click that link and go to the next slide. Here, okay, is that we can see that biotechnology, at least, is concentrated in different parts of the United States. And but it's actually spread out. Sometimes you might think it's just California or just Boston, but it's actually many parts of the country. Let's go on to our next slide to show another aspect of navigation. And now I want you to click Puerto Rico, which is actually not a state, but it's a really important part of the United States when it comes to manufacturing biopharmaceuticals. 10% of all prescription drugs are manufactured in Puerto Rico, and most major biopharmaceutical companies have facilities there, such as Amgen and Pfizer and Eli Lilly and Merck and AstraZeneca. And you may have heard that there'll be probably some shortages, possibly of up to 40 different drugs, including treatments for cancer and HIV and rheumatoid arthritis. And because they're made only in Puerto Rico, and there's 14 drugs that are only made there. So we can see one more thing about this slide before we go on, is we can see that biologics and manufacturing and drug delivery, those are the things that they do a lot of in Puerto Rico. Let's go back. Let's go on to our next slide, and we're going to look at a different part of the country, Washington State. And I'm bringing this up because it's kind of fun. If you click different states in the country map, the state map, you can see that every state has their specialty. Where Puerto Rico is doing manufacturing, in Washington, you see there's a lot of cancer therapeutics and immunology, which is really kind of interesting to see state by state what the specialties are. Okay, let's go on to our next slide. So I'd just like to summarize. We talk to students about what they like, what they find interesting, what they value, where they want to live, and what kinds of jobs there are and what jobs are where. Now let's go on and let's share some more of our strategies for teaching about careers. See, we have some others that we haven't really hit on yet.
We'll give people a few minutes while we're discussing here, Sandy, for them to add things. They've been doing pretty well about adding things into that Q&A window, we've talked about apprenticeships and a number of other opportunities connecting with alumni and things like that. So as we go forward, we'll just look for people's input into that window. But we've
I'd like
covered
to
everything
add
so
that
far.
we might, is that some of the these emerging jobs are really clean jobs. And this is working in clean rooms, working in manufacturing, working in biomedical devices, and oftentimes when you mention the word manufacturing to a student or to their parents, they think of something that they remember from their past. And I often tell a student that has allergies that think about working in a clean room because you know there's no pollen in there. It's really good air quality. So there's things to consider that people don't necessarily think of.
Well, thank you, Elaine. Sandy, while we're waiting, what's your favorite strategy? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Well, this isn't, I can't take the credit for developing this, but one of the high school teachers that I've worked with told me that his favorite strategy, which I like a lot too, is he has each student pick a career to research, and then he has a small little party for them with, you know, crackers and juice and stuff, and they pretend they're at a cocktail party, and they interview each other and ask each other about their jobs. So, and then they have to share, you know, what they learned from the other students. But it puts them in a position of having to make small talk, having to learn about a job, actually having to talk about it. And I find that when students have to learn about something to the extent that they actually have to talk about it, it makes them pay a lot more attention. Plus, I think it's kind of fun.
Sure, you give them a performance task, right? You say, look, now I want you to go out and do this. That's interesting. I like that idea. Let me turn at this question phase to Elaine. Elaine, who would you say benefits from this career exploration, the whole thing we've been talking about? Who benefits?
Well, everybody, I think, benefits because the companies benefit, because the students know more about the careers that are that they might be going into. The students certainly benefit by finding out more about themselves, what they like, what they're good at, and what careers are out there and in their immediate area and region. And I think the ones that we don't necessarily think of are counselors and parents, and the importance of understanding these emerging careers and opportunities of coming to community and technical colleges, and the huge importance of saving money. We've got reports out about student loans, about repaying loans forever, and just the idea that a student can come in and actually get into a workplace and have the companies pay for the rest of their education or move forward within companies is a tremendous advantage that many people don't recognize.
Good comments there, Elaine. Thanks. Folks, if we look at our time, you can see we're perfectly on time. We're almost at the end of our hour together. While we're taking our final questions, let me advance to this slide, which has the contact information. And as you saw, both Elaine and Sandy are very knowledgeable in this area. They've really pushed all of these technologies hard, particularly in the biotech, but lots of lessons that can be shared into other technologies as well. And they will respond to you if you send them emails to talk. Elaine, I've got you on the hot seat for right now. Here's the question for you. How can you help a student who is unsure about what he or she likes? What advice do you give this student?
The students frequently don't know what they like, and they haven't had the experience to know that. And so there are strength finders is one possibility where people learn about their own strengths, their own personalities. Sometimes they don't think about the different times of day that the jobs take place. sometimes they're on weekends and shifts, and they haven't thought about that. So it's like, oh, would I like to work in the evenings or on weekends and have some extra time during the week? These are things that all come up. And so there's kind of a checklist, and there's also the importance of really talking to the person and listening. Many of the students don't realize what wonderful things they bring to the table, like knowing a second language, or maybe they're studying English as a second language, and they're fluent in their native language. They can bring that to the table. Sometimes they're veterans, and they have experiences that they don't see how they fit with the possible careers. We had one example of a baker who was working in a pastry shop and wanted to get into biotech, and now has for years been in charge of the media kitchen at the University of California, San Francisco, and the researchers rely on getting superb media, and he likes to follow recipes. And now he's got benefits and retirement and a number of things that he didn't have as an individual baker. So these are things that I think that people learn, but to listen to people's stories and then carry on a conversation is a really important piece of that.
That's a really good point, Elaine, and thank you for making that one. Elaine and Sandy, I'm going to ask you to hold on for a minute because we're going to have a wrap-up question for each of you. But let me take our attendees through the next couple of slides as we close out for today. Remember, this webinar is going to be recorded, so you'll get an automatic link to that. But pay attention to our upcoming webinars on Thursday, November 16th, the role of advisor, counselor, and career coach. As you can see, it sort of tags onto our topic today and focuses on that segment of things. Also, Elaine will be one of our key presenters for that, so thank you, Elaine. Please join us in National Harbor. Many of you know about the League for Innovations Conference, March 18 through 21. There's going to be a half-day CCTA workshop held during that, so look forward to that in the spring and March. And also join us in Miami. Get out your rollerblades and your other gear for the boardwalk there for the High Impact Technology Exchange Conference. Notice the dates, July 23 through 26. A great opportunity to interact with your colleagues, and there's going to be a high tech and Department of Labor and National Science Foundation workforce convening event. Typically that's held on the final day, the following day. That would be Friday, July 27th for that event. So look for that information. Go to the website, highimpact-tech.org. Sandy mentioned that there's a number of resources, and as you get these slides, you'll see things like atetv.org, ATE Central, of course, direct links to Career One Stop, ONET, Bureau of Labor Statistics. So thank you, Sandy, for providing that information for us. Now, folks, I'm going to tell you about the webinar survey. Well, I'll tell you about it right now. As you close today, you can't escape because a new browser window opens and there are 4 questions that we'd like you to click the answers to. It just takes us a minute, it takes you a minute to help us improve. Thank you again. Sandy and Elaine, as we wrap up today, I'd like to ask you, Sandy, this is a hard question, I know, but of all the things we've talked about today, what's the one thing that you think, if you had limited resources, what's the one thing you should start with or do to help career awareness, career resources?
Okay, that's a good question. I think if I had limited resources, and it would depend on who I knew, I would actually try to reach out, especially if I teach in a college. I would definitely try to reach out to alumni. Get as many alumni to talk to your students as possible. I really like the idea of having them Skype in, because then it's not going to inconvenience them with their job, and they'll probably be a lot more successful. So I think, yeah, I think that is your best resource.
I like that answer, and I like that Skype idea too. Elaine, we have 30 seconds left, so the last question is for you. What about older students, right? We sort of been thinking about younger students, but suppose you're military, or you're older, or you're re-careering. Does the advice change, or what do you suggest if you're an older student?
The advice changes some, but the welcome mat is out, and the programs definitely encourage students who are retooling to come back to the community college to, if they haven't been at the community college before, to enter, and there are resources for these students. This is a part where we have internal partners at our college. They have veterans programs. The counselors have resources to support these students, and so the bottom line is that the jobs are available for these students. They're welcome to participate in the programs, and we encourage them.
Excellent comment there, Elaine. Elaine and Sandy, thank you both. It's just such a pleasure of talking with you today, seeing your insights, having the participation by our participants through the Q&A window and the polls. That's appreciated. Friends, this officially ends our webinar. Thanks to Christina Titus, who is working the system and the communications in the background at the CTC Center. Thank you, Christina. So colleagues, look forward to, let's say in about 48 hours, an announcement from us that gives you the link to the recording and to the slides from today. That officially ends our webinar. Please, as that survey pops up as you close, take a few moments and respond. Thank you again. Goodbye, Sandy. Goodbye, Elaine.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.